Hello and welcome to Betfred Football Show. We're going to work our way through another 10 fantastic matches in the Premier League this weekend, all in the company of this man on my left, former England goalkeeper Paul Robinson. Before we head into those though, Paul, your former club Spurs, Champions League, all of course in the mix for the big game against Marseille at the weekend, next week I should say, but VAR, the big talking point once again. That's the difference, could be, between them qualifying and not.
We could sit here all day, couldn't we, and talk about it, and I found myself talking about it all week. And I mean, if you break it down, you get to the absolute crux of it. Let's be honest, they got to the right decision. It was offside, but the grey areas of the amount of time it took to get to the right decision, do we want that in football? VAR was brought in for clear and obvious. And my take on it is that from a Spurs point of view, I've been sat all week thinking, well, it is a goal, but it shouldn't be a goal. It's not right. And I'm trying to find reasons that it's not right. The ball went backwards, but apparently that's the rule, that's okay now. We've all been educated this week.
Who knows?
Who knows? But I think that the thing for me is the only argument that you've got from a Spurs point of view or from a football point of view that VAR is kind of killing the game a bit.
Yeah.
4.5 minutes. So you've got an option there. Do you want a quick decision wrong or do you want the right decision in 4.5 minutes? I think if it's 4.5 minutes long, it's not clear and obvious. But it's one of them, it's a bitter pill to swallow. And then now, you rightly say, they've got a really tough ask in Marseille.
Certainly, Javier Conte's talking about compensation maybe if they don't qualify. That's going to rumble and rumble though. But let's focus on the Premier League. Before we dive into that though, we've got lots of games where tabletop has taken on teams struggling in the relegation battle. So let's join Sean with the outrights, both outright and relegation betting.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Let's have a look at the top half of the Premier League table, first of all, because we're nearly, would you believe, a third of the way into the new Premier League season. And I don't think many people would have believed this. Arsenal right at the top on 28 points, 9 wins from their opening 11 games. And of course, not many people would have believed that as well. Liverpool in 8th position, just 4 wins from their opening 11 games. And look at Liverpool now on 16 points. They are 12 points off top spot. Of course, City, many people expected them to win once again. They're only 2 points off, only 1 defeat against Liverpool. But I think really the big thing to note is we always think of it as a big 6. I think now it is a big 7 in the Premier League, with Newcastle muscling their way in. And as you can see, they're now in the top 4, just 1 defeat and only 10 goals conceded. What a brilliant job that Eddie Howe is doing there at St James's Park. But in terms of who's going to win the Premier League, let's have a look at the outright. And of course, City have won 4 of the last 5. The clear favourites once again at 1-5. In fact, they're into 1-5 from 4-7 to start the season, despite not being top at this stage. Arsenal, big movers as well. They were 50-1, would you believe, to win the Premier League. They're now in there at 13-2. And Liverpool, in contrast, out to 25-1. They started the season at just 2-1 to win the Premier League. In terms of the bottom half, let's have a look at the table. And you can see there's not much in it really now. You can see there's 5 points between 10th actually in West Ham and rock bottom. Those 3 sides all locked in at 9 points. Nobody's adrift anymore because Forest got that big win last week, of course. And well, they're still in trouble. They're still clear favourites, but Leeds and Wolves really are starting to worry now because Leeds 8 without a win. They've lost 6 of those games. And Wolves, of course, well, just 2 wins in 12. And crucially for me, just 5 goals scored all season long. They desperately need a goal scorer. Let's have a look at the odds in terms of relegation. No surprise that Nottingham Forest are still clear favourites to be relegated in there at 8-15. Bournemouth, after a good spell, have had a couple of defeats and they're odds on once again at 8-13. But again, we have to pinpoint the likes of Wolves and Leeds, especially with Southampton and Leicester finding form. And of course, Unai Emery now at Aston Villa. But Wolves 13-8, Leeds 7-4. Wolves are the biggest movers in this market. They were 6-1 to start the season. Now backed in all the way to 13-8. If they don't start scoring goals, it's going to be a long season for Wolves.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I agree with him about Wolves. We'll talk about them a little later. But leads us nice into Leicester versus Man City, our first game of the weekend. A win for City, Paul, and they're top for at least 24 hours. But Leicester, they've found some form now, isn't it? 7 points for possible 9 at home. Last 3 games have not conceded a goal. This is going to be plain sailing for City.
Well, a couple of weeks ago it might have been, but you look at Leicester now. I covered Leicester for a broadcaster against Leeds and they look comfortable. And I think the thing that Brendan Rodgers has had, they've given him time, whether it be a financial reason that they've had to, they didn't want to pay him off, or whatever the reason was, that they've given him time, they've stuck with him. And they've done right to do that because he's built the success on clean sheets. Wout Faes at the back for them has been outstanding. He's been a leader for them. And I think the clean sheet record that they've got, especially home advantage now against Manchester City, listen, it's going to be tough for them. We know it's going to be tough. But I think their recent record, I mean, you look at them the other week against Wolves, they had hardly any possession, 4 shots on goal and won the game 4-0. So they're a team that are going in the right direction, but listen, they're a team that's still in trouble. And Man City, on the other hand, they're on an upward curve. I mean, I saw them at the weekend against Brighton. They were outstanding. Again, in the week against Dortmund, kind of went through the motions. It was kind of a game where both teams accepted a draw, so they could kind of, all right, you go through, we'll go through.
That was the third time in 4 games they haven't scored. You're not worried about that now?
City? No, not at all. I mean, I saw them against Brighton. I think the 2 previous games to that, the Liverpool game, they were a bit off colour. And I think against Brighton, first half, they could have scored as many as they wanted. The problem that they've got is how serious is this injury to Haaland? He came off at half-time in the week, we know that. So that'll be an issue for them. I think Leicester will cause them a problem because they've got creativity going forward. They've got Maddison, whether Vardy plays, perhaps Ndaka plays, whoever plays, Leicester can get at this City defence. We've seen them, concede goals. We saw Trossard do it last week for Brighton against City. So although City are good going forward, I still think they've got defensive vulnerability.
Yeah, I think they certainly have. Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting game to kick us. Our feeling Haaland, by the way, if he does play and if he does score, he's scored as many league goals this season as Juventus. I mean, it's been sensational. He's gone 92 minutes without a goal. What's going wrong?
I know, he's on a drought, isn't he? He's on a real drought. I mean, you look at, he's got 17 now, I think it is. It's the same as what Harry Kane got last year. So I was watching the game, Man City, Brighton, and doing all my homework before the game. Danny Welbeck's had 23 attempts this year. Haaland's got 17 goals.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Go on, give us a prediction.
It's going to be a City win for me, but I think Leicester will give him a good game. I've gone for a 3-1 City win, and depending on Haaland's fitness, he's always going to be your banker. And I think I've gone for Foden to score. So it's either going to be Foden or Grealish that plays. So I've gone for a 3-1 away win and Foden to score.
That's the first game that kicks us off then in front of the BT cameras on Saturday lunchtime. Move on to the Sky game at 5:30 then, which sees Fulham take on Everton. And Fulham, along with Bournemouth, surprised many coming up this year. They're doing really well, haven't they? They won the last 2 back-to-back wins, Villa and Leeds, taking Everton side. Although they got that big win against Palace, impressive, they are woeful on the road. Lost 21 the last 23 away from home. Just 1 away win all season.
Yeah, they're not good away from home, as in picking up wins or points. But there's a change there at Everton. They're looking a lot better defensively. You look at Connor Cody, you look at James Tarkowski. They've got leaders there now. I mean, what would Wolves give for a player like Connor Cody now? I mean, I couldn't understand that one when it went in the window anyway. I think Everton defensively look a lot more sound. Fulham this year have surprised a lot of people. They've got some good players. Marco Silva's getting the best out of Willian. Saw him against Leeds at the weekend. Yes, they won 3-2, but it wasn't a 3-2 game. They cruised that game. They really put Leeds to the sword, and they could have won by more. With Mitrovic scoring goals, they're a different proposition this year. It'll be a big ask for Everton to go there this weekend.
Mitrovic, talking of Mitrovic, if he scores, this is an incredible stat, he becomes the 5th player in the top 5 leagues in Europe to hit double figures for the season, behind Haaland, Lewandowski, Kane and Mbappe. That's some company to keep, isn't it?
Absolutely. And there was a big question over him this year whether he could do it in the Premier League, because he hasn't done it previously with Fulham or Newcastle. And then he goes to the Championship and he walks the Championship and he thinks, he was almost labelled as too good for the Championship but not good enough for the Premier League. But now he's playing in a better Fulham team that are creating more chances in the Premier League, and he's getting his goals. And as you say, he's up there.
Certainly, he's 3 wins from the 6 home games for Fulham this season. Is it a home win, or do Everton finally break that away day hoodoo?
I don't think they're going to break the away day hoodoo, but I think with the defensive strength that they've got, Everton, I think they can get something at Craven Cottage. I think it'll be a draw. I've gone for a score draw. I've gone a 1-1 draw, but it's an interesting one. Calvert-Lewin's back in form, back playing. Mitrovic is playing well, scoring goals. So I've gone for a 1-1 draw and Calvert-Lewin and Mitrovic to score. There might be some value in that.
Like it, yes. Goals will draw then for that game at tea time. We're not done on Saturday. It's a rare Saturday night game. Liverpool taking on Leeds. Are you ready for this?
Oh. Well, I'd rather be watching it than in a goal for it for Leeds, put it that
way. You're getting a bad back. Look at the stats. I mean, they're damning, aren't they? Just 2 points collected from a possible last 24 for Leeds. Not one since 27th of August. That was in the AFL Cup. All those early season games, a couple of early wins, a long forgotten memory.
Yeah, I mean, they had 7 points after 3 games. What they'd give for 3 points in 7 games now. I mean, the record's really poor. I think performances are poor. They're playing too narrow, and without going into it tactically too much, they set up too narrow, and he does that to trigger the press. But then they're getting found out. They're conceding far too many goals, defensive errors. But I think he's been found tactically short, in all honesty, at the moment. The other week against Arsenal, second half, they were very, very good. Probably the best performance of the season, take out the Chelsea game. But they're not able to sustain that over a period of time. So after that second half performance, they go into the Leicester game, and I'm thinking, going to have a performance here. They're playing against a poor Leicester side, attack them, put them under pressure, and they didn't have anything. They didn't offer anything. And this weekend against Fulham, they were awful, really, really bad. I mean, they got booed off by the fans, and quite rightly so. There's a lot of unrest there, a real lot of unrest. And I know Liverpool aren't playing particularly well at the moment, but Anfield's the last place they need to be going. Yeah,
I'll have a prediction shortly. We'll talk about the managerial situation as well. But there's been 13 goals between these two sides in the last 2 games they've clashed at Anfield. So let's get some more match odds and some correct score betting as well with Sean.
Yeah, cannot wait for this one, Matt. Saturday night, 7:45 kick-off at Anfield. 2 massive clubs going head-to-head in the Premier League as Liverpool take on Leeds. And Liverpool, as you can see, clear favourites, 100-30 on. The draw is 4-1. Leeds at 15-2. And well, no surprise that Liverpool at home are clear favourites in the Premier League. When the fans have been in attendance here, they haven't lost in 5.5 years. They've got a brilliant record against Leeds as well, unbeaten in the last 12 meetings. And of course, Leeds not going well. 8 without a win now in the league. They've lost 6 of those games, and this could be the end, you never know, for Jesse Marsch. He's under a lot of pressure there at Leeds. Also, well, you might look at Liverpool and think they did lose to Forest last week. They are actually closer to Leeds in the relegation zone than they are the top 2, Arsenal and City, in the Premier League. So you have to factor that in. But for me, Liverpool, one of the bankers in the Premier League this weekend. Let's have a look at the correct scores as well. I've had some big scores over the years, a 4-3 not too long ago. And last season, it was 6-0 at home to Liverpool and 3-0 away. 6-0 isn't on the graphic, but I had a look and it's a massive 40-1. But if you do fancy Liverpool 3-0, that's available at just 15-2. Prior to those 2 meetings last season, Leeds had actually scored in the 5 prior. So maybe 2-1, something like that. That's in there at 15-2, or 3-2. Could we have a classic? That is available at 16-1. There's usually lots of goals when these two are involved, but I think they'll mostly be good for Liverpool this weekend.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, he's talking telephone numbers there.
Oh, probably rightly so, the way Leeds are defending. I think the thing for Liverpool is his injuries. And looking back over the notes from the last couple of weeks, the Forest game, we know Liverpool, they played all right. They should have won that game by set plays and the chances they had. He had 8 injuries: Jota, Matip, Diaz, Keita, Konate, Arthur, Nunez, and Thiago pulled out just before kickoff. Yeah. So you take that out of any team, it's a huge loss. And I think at home they've looked better. You know, they had the Man City result at home, beat West Ham as well. So at that point you think they're on an upward curve. They're still not the Liverpool team of old, but you look at the players they've got there, the firepower that they've got. I think they can really hurt Leeds this weekend. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the manager's future, and there's not a lot of worse places he could have wished to go for this weekend.
Back of this though, they've got Bournemouth, haven't they, Lee? So just talk about the managerial situation. I mean, you know, he's hanging by a thread by what we hear, we believe, and the World Cup's only 3 games away. Is it time for a change? Do you think they will change during the World Cup? I
think they'll change if they don't pick up points. This weekend it's not a season-defining game, although it is. When you're in the bottom 3, you look for points everywhere. So at the beginning of the season, you don't look, from a Leeds United point of view, you don't go Liverpool away, OK, we need to pick up points there, that'll keep us in the league. That's not a season-defining game. Next week, Bournemouth at home is massive. The week after that, they're away at Tottenham. So before the World Cup, they're away at Liverpool, away at Tottenham, and they're at home to Bournemouth. Realistically, what would they look to pick up? They'd pick up 3 points would be massive. 1 win out of those 3 games keeps him in a job, I think. Depending on how they lose at Anfield, if they were to lose this weekend, depending on how they lose at Anfield this weekend, depends on whether he's in a job or not on Monday. If they go to Anfield, roll over and concede X amount of goals, then there's going to be a huge clamour for his job to go next week. If they go to Anfield, put in a performance and there's shoots of a Chelsea performance that they've had, an Arsenal performance that they have, he keeps his job and goes into Bournemouth. And then if he keeps his job by the Bournemouth game, he's still in his job for the World Cup. And then that's when they make the change if things aren't right. I think he's been tactically inept this year. I think he's been found short. And I just think now, from a Leeds United point of view, the club's regressed since Bielsa's left. I don't for 1 minute argue with the decision to get rid of Bielsa. I think it was right. Jesse earned the right to take us into this league because he kept them up last year. But is he the right man? I don't think that's been proved yet. And he's got a very, very short space of time to prove that he is the right man for the job. I think if he was to go, you look no further than somebody like Sean Dyche. Now the remit is, 12 months ago when Bielsa left, the remit is keep that club in the Premier League. It's been out of it for so long. You're not looking for progression. You're not looking to go up the table. That club has to stay in the Premier League. That team now, at the moment, has got less points than my team that got relegated in 2003, and it's got less points than the Bielsa team that he got the sack for last year. So he's in a real predicament.
Give us a prediction for this Saturday night.
Oh, it's heart and head job, but in all honesty, I can't see how Leeds are going to get anything. I've gone 4-0 Liverpool.
4-0 Liverpool, then it could be a rout at Anfield on Saturday night. That takes us through to Old Trafford and Sunday afternoon. Manchester United taking on West Ham. West Ham have lost more Premier League games at Old Trafford than anywhere else. 21 times they've been beaten here in the Premier League. Ronaldo on the score sheet, though, at the weekend, in midweek after all that happened to him with the Spurs game. But do you think he'll start in the Premier League? It looks to be like he's keeping him for the Europa League and going with more fresher, younger, faster players for the Premier League games.
I'm not so sure on the opposition that United played in midweek, whether that counts or not. But listen, it was a goal for him. And the fact that he's back on board, because to have Ronaldo back on board and in that squad is big for Manchester United. I think he just found himself in a position where he's no longer first name on the team sheet. He's no longer first pick in the playground, and he didn't really know how to deal with that. It looks for the short term that relationships have been healed and he's getting on with the manager. From his record, he gets you 1 goal every 2 games. So why would you not want him involved? The team look to be playing better without him, but at times during this season, you're going to need him. United need a number 9. Okay, when Marcus Rashford's playing at the moment, he's playing well, scoring goals. Martial, you can't rely on him being fit. Outside of Rashford and Martial, you need Ronaldo or a number 9, and something like that gives you such a good option. He's one of the world's best players. I mean, whether he's at that level now or not is yet to be seen. In answer to your question, does he start? No, I don't think he does. I think he reverts back to the team from the previous weekend. The performance against Chelsea was very good, very good. They made Potter change his tactics.
They've bounced back from the City defeat well, haven't they?
Hugely, and I think it's the real statement for me was the Spurs win and the way they beat Spurs. Casemiro was outstanding. They dominated that game, and that was a statement win for a manager. Managers look for statement wins to players look at it and go, well, he's actually making sense because what he's telling us to do is working, and that Spurs win was a dominant win for me. Yeah,
it certainly was. Right, give us a prediction Sunday afternoon.
West Ham were good last week against Brentford, although there was 2 very, very dodgy goals. Questionable with the VAR again. Decent win this week in midweek in the Europa League for them, Europa Conference League, sorry. But I think it's a big ask for them, like you said, they've got a poor record there, and United are strong. I've gone 2-0 United.
2-0 United, then a comfortable win for the Reds. Continue that resurgence then. Right, just by the way, going into that game, just talking about United, they've been playing well. Yellow cards, they've had more than any other team so far this season, 32, which is interesting, isn't it? The way United usually play, keep the ball on the front foot, they're picking up more yellow cards than anyone else.
Yeah, I think it's not something that will hurt them short term, it's something that will hurt them long term, because after the 5 and 10, the suspensions, and you start losing the players. So it's obviously something that the manager won't be keen to do. You certainly don't want to lose your players through a massive yellow cards.
No, right, that's 4 TV games before we get Paul to rattle through the rest of the weekend's fixtures. Here's Sean once again to run us through the long list.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Let's have a look at the Premier League long list this weekend. And I always think it's tricky after a European midweek to pick out those bankers, but we'll try and do that. Manchester City 1-4 away at Leicester. You'd expect them to win, but they've only won 2 of the last 7 away games of Man City, and Leicester now found a bit of form. Tottenham, odds on. Would you be backing them? Odds on now. They're at 4-6 away at Bournemouth. Spurs, similarly, well, they've lost the last 2 Premier League games. Didn't get it done in midweek. And Spurs, only 1 win in their last 6 away from home as well. So, again, on the road, these big sides are struggling of late. You've got Chelsea, who are perhaps surprisingly odds against. They're at 11-8. Of course, Graham Potter going back to the Amex to take on Brighton. That'll be interesting to see if they can get a win against their old boss, and it will be his first loss in charge, of course, against Chelsea as well. And then you've got Liverpool at home to Leeds. Now, I think they probably are the bankers at 100-30 on at home against the Leeds side, who are now winless in 8. They've lost 6 of those 8 games. Jesse Marsch is really on the brink, and we know how good Liverpool are at home in front of a crowd. When the fans have been in at Anfield, they haven't lost in the Premier League in 5.5 years. They're also unbeaten in the last 12 against Leeds as well. And then finally, Arsenal in there at 1-6 at home to Nottingham Forest. Of course, we saw what Forest did last week against Liverpool. Can they do something similar against the Arsenal? Well, Arsenal have looked a bit fatigued of late. They were disappointing against PSV in midweek, but at home, surely lightning won't strike twice. Arsenal 1-6, probably the other banker for me. So if you're going to pick 2 out this week, I think Liverpool and Arsenal are the ones. But I would be just a little bit concerned about those top 2, City and Tottenham.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, well, let's talk about Tottenham then. We'll rattle through the rest of the games briefly, the ones we haven't looked at. Bournemouth taking on the Spurs, all one of your former clubs, Paul, and a little bit of concern for Conte's side at the minute.
I don't think it's the way they're playing. I just think the pedestrian style, the defensive style, sat here with Mark last week and said about, as English fans and pundits, we don't appreciate the defensive side of the game. It's almost the creativity's gone. Without Kulusevski, they seem to lack a real creative edge. Kane and Son at times seem to be isolated, and it's just not pleasing on the eye. I mean, it doesn't look. I mean, the first half against Eintracht Frankfurt the week before last, they were excellent, but since then it's been very, very defensive. Champions League game this week, okay. The weekend again, very, very defensive and picked apart by a Newcastle team. Listen, they're doing okay, Newcastle, but you look at that on paper and you'd expect Spurs to win that game, or certainly play in a different manner, rather than worry about what Newcastle can do to Spurs at home. Spurs should be worrying about what they can do to Newcastle, how they're going to destroy them. And I just think that the setup and the defensive style at the moment is not pleasing on the eye, is it?
Bournemouth doing okay, better than expected this year. How do you see this one going?
Doing a lot better than expected, but goals have dried up recently. They were disappointing to lose 2-0 last week against West Ham. Gary O'Neill was very frustrated about the 2 goals. He's doing a decent audition for the manager's job there, to be seen what happens there. But I've gone and said it won't be an easy game for Spurs. I've got written down, won't be easy. Bournemouth will make it difficult for them, but I've gone Spurs to win 2-0. I think it'll be a really cagey game. I think Spurs will go 1-0 up early, and then they'll sit, and then nick one on the break late on. 2-0.
There we are then, and the game plan as well. Right, Brentford versus Wolves 0.
Difficult game to predict this, isn't it? Brentford,
5 goals all year for what Wolves. 5 goals.
And then Brentford lost 4-0 last week at Villa. Wolves lost 4-0 against Leicester. So Wolves have got a real problem at the moment, a real problem. There's no cohesion. There's no kind of understanding what the manager wants. For me, they've given the manager the job till the World Cup, which I think is a mistake. They need to get a manager in there and they need to sort that out quickly. Whether Diego Costa's going to be the answer to that, I don't know. I mean, I can't see anything other than a Brentford win this weekend. At home, they're a very, very different proposition to what they are on the road. I think they're a wounded animal. You saw what Ivan Toney said after the game against Villa last week. He wasn't happy with his team, his teammates. I think the way Thomas Frank plays at home, I'm going to go for a comfortable 3-0 Brentford home win.
3-0 Brentford, then more misery for Wolves.
There's one thing, Wolves won't score.
That's home as well, yeah. So, Brighton taking on Chelsea. The honeymoon period well and truly over for Roberto De Zerbi. Obviously, that 3-3 at Anfield, but he kind of threw it away late on. Just 1 goal scored since, 2 points from a possible 15 against a resurgent Chelsea. Graham Potter back at his former club, of course.
Yeah, he's doing well there, Graham Potter, isn't he? I mean, he's had a real interesting start to life there. He's won games which a lot of managers haven't done. You questioned whether his character, how he would settle in the Chelsea dressing room, but he's demanded respect straight away. They had a big win in the week against Salzburg. Nobody's won there for a couple of seasons, I don't think. So it was a big win for him. I think De Zerbi, I saw them play against Man City last weekend. They caused City problems at the start of the second half with Trossard and Solly March. He changed it a little bit. He brought Lamptey on right wing back. He put Solly March left wing back and he played Trossard in front of him. And they were better. They were a lot better second half. There were signs there that can cause teams problems. But as you quite rightfully say, they haven't won for a long time, and scoring goals has been their real struggle. At home against a resurgent Chelsea, I think Graham Potter will go there, and I think his team will win, in all honesty.
Yeah, then Chelsea to get the victory in that one. Jekyll and Hyde, Crystal Palace. They host Southampton. You never know what you're going to get, do you, with Vieira's side?
No, and I expected more from him last week at Everton. Yeah. I think at the moment, he's got a mix of trying to get all his attacking players on the pitch, but at the same time trying to be defensively solid as well. I think last week at Everton they were poor, they were picked apart. The offensive quality, that he's got in the final third, when that clicks, they look a really good team. But like you say, they're Jekyll and Hyde. Home advantage is a big thing. We all know what Selhurst Park, the atmosphere is like there. And again, there's 2 teams really that are Jekyll and Hyde, because Southampton, you never know what you're going to get. One week you've got championship winning form, the next week they're looking like relegation candidates. I mean, I tipped them to go down at the beginning of the year. You just don't know where they're going to be. They had a great result against Arsenal last week. And in all honesty, between all that, that's what I've written down. 1-1 draw, because I can't separate these 2 teams. You don't know what you're going to get. So I've just gone for a 1-1 draw.
There we do then, yeah, splinters there. But yeah, I see exactly where you're coming from. St James's Park, Newcastle taking on Aston Villa. 7 days ago, you'd be looking at a home win. 90 minutes is a long time in football. Villa, Steven Gerrard goes. Unai Emery is now in. Of course, he wasn't in last week. 4-0 win over Brentford. Who saw that one coming?
No, there's two ways to look at that. There's a double narrative with that. The players, everyone's great, fantastic, 4-0 win. But actually, what does that look like on Steven Gerrard, that the players can then turn in a performance like that the week after he goes? But then you look at the players, you question the players. If they can do that with 2 days of a new voice, 2 days training, you've got to question what they were given for the previous manager. And as a player yourself, you've got responsibility for yourself when you cross the line. You've got responsibility for your teammates and the club you play for. If you can play that way 3 days later than Fulham midweek when Stephen got sacked, there's a double narrative on that. And I don't like that looking from the outside looking in. But from a Villa point of view, it's a great result for them. With Unai Emery coming into them, it's obviously going to change. He's done well in Europe where he's been. Too many people have said, he's got unfinished business in this country. Not so sure he's unfinished business. He wasn't good enough at Arsenal. I think he's got something to prove. He's not got unfinished business, and he wants to prove himself in the best league in the world again. So I think going forward for Villa, it'll be a good appointment. But I don't think the manager gets the same reaction from the players that he did last week. I don't think that group of players become all of a sudden a really good group of players just because they've beaten Brentford 4-0. So I think Newcastle were impressive last week. I like what Eddie Howe's doing, and I've gone for a 2-0 Newcastle win. Yeah,
2-0 Newcastle win. Of course, that win for Newcastle last week put them into the top four. They are contenders the way they are playing at present to break into the stranglehold. Right, finally, Arsenal taking on Forest. Slight alarm bells ringing for Mikel Arteta. Listen to his press conference after the PSV defeat last night. And when Southampton equalised last week, I didn't see much from them all out to go and get a winner. It was a strange performance.
This is the point where we knew it was going to come with Arsenal. This is the test, whether they can stay there, whether they can sustain the test of time. We know Manchester City are just going to go to the top of that league, and they're going to be a steamroller that's going to take some stopping. Arsenal have got to stay with them. Against Leeds a couple of weeks ago, Arsenal showed a lot of character and resilience to get the result they did. They got outplayed, they got well beaten in the second half, but they got the result. Against Southampton last weekend, they didn't look quite at it, and then they lost to PSV this week. So this is the first real question that Mikel Arteta is going to have to answer. I think he's not rotated his starting 11 enough at the moment for me, if you look at it. I think Granit Xhaka could have done with a rest last night. I think there's a few players that he could have done with rotating, but they've been on such a good run that he wants to keep that run going. As far as Forest go, I mean, we all know about the win that they got against Liverpool. They've slowly...
And the FA Cup win over Arsenal last year as well.
I don't think you can attribute anything. I think they're two very different sides. I think Forest have been poor this year, I really do. I mean, the week before they beat Liverpool, they played Brighton away. And looking at it, Brighton had 71% of the possession and 19 shots in a 0-0 draw. So you don't become a good team overnight. And this is what's the old saying, a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then. So I think Forest have still got a heck of a lot of work to do. I think this will be a stepping stone too far from going to the Emirates, and I think they'll get put back in their place against Arsenal.
They are a convincing Arsenal win. Mikel Arteta's side back and remaining on top, according to Paul Robinson. So that's the games looked at then. Best bet time. Where are we going? What are we thinking of?
I've got an interesting one for you.
I love an interesting one.
It's a red bet. It's a red bet, and they're all at home. Liverpool, Arsenal, Man United, all three to win, but not to concede a goal.
All three to win.
All three to win to 0. So that's.
I like that.
I mean, if you look at all three, Liverpool, Leeds, yeah, okay. Arsenal, Forest, Man U, West Ham, you'd back them all to win. But all three to win to 0. I think that you get some decent odds there.
There we are then. Yeah, I like it. Arsenal, Liverpool and Man United all to win 2-0 without conceding a goal. Paul Robinson's best bet. Great to have him back alongside us once again. Looking forward to another great weekend of Premier League action. Of course, we are just 3 weeks away, of course, from the World Cup over in Qatar. Whenever you're back in this weekend, the very best luck. As always, please gamble responsibly.